Cubans awaiting the arrival of U.S. relatives they haven't seen in years. The human impact of a sweeping U.S.-Cuba policy shift to establish diplomatic ties. As travel, trade, and financial restrictions are gradually lifted, U.S. and Cuban delegations say they are making progress on key sticking points as they work to open embassies in Washington and Havana. After a second round of talks in Washington Friday, Cuban delegation leader Josefina Vidal says Havana wants the U.S. to remove Cuba from its list of states that sponsor terrorism.
For us, it would be difficult to explain that Cuba and the U.S. have reestablished normal diplomatic relations while Cuba is kept in that list that we believe we have never belonged to.
The Cuban official said removal is not a precondition for reestablishing ties. The head of the U.S. delegation, Assistant Secretary of State Roberta Jacobson, said the issue is under U.S. review.
We are going to do that as quickly as we can in accordance with the requirements of the law, but that we see that and the establishment of diplomatic relations as separate processes.
The Cuban delegation expressed hope that Havana will be given more access to U.S. financial services. The U.S. reported progress on the question of how much movement diplomats would be allowed in Cuba and how much access they would have to the Cuban people.
There's a lot of mistrust on both sides.
Inter-American Dialogue President Michael Shifter says Cuban hardliners are suspicious of U.S. intentions.
And they want to make sure that if the U.S. diplomats in Cuba have access, free access, they're not going to be plotting with opposition figures and dissidents who are intent on changing the regime.
The White House policy, says Shifter, is betting that change will happen from within.
That's the gamble that the United States is taking, that this will lead to the empowerment of the Cuban people, that they'll have greater access to the internet, they'll be connected to the world, they'll know what's happening in the world, and there'll be increased organization, mobilization, political pressure within Cuba, and they'll work out their own destiny.
The two sides announced a series of meetings to address a range of topics, including human rights, an issue that sparked U.S. protests after the White House announced its new approach toward Cuba. The head of the U.S. delegation says the talks have been so productive, it is possible the embassies in Washington and Havana may open by the April Summit of the Americas in Panama. Mary Alice Salinas, VOA News, the State Department.